Don Zimmer's legendary career spanned 8 decades. Along the way, he played with or coached some of the game's biggest stars and was a part of more history-making moments than just about anyone in baseball. On this edition of Raise All Access, we'll look back at the ultimate baseball lifer by talking with those who knew him best.
That name just says baseball. And when you get to know him, you realize that that was his life. I mean, he loved baseball through and through.
We'll sit down with the woman who was by his side through it all and ran the show at home while Zim pursued his dream.
I drove across the country many times, but it was all, to me, it was fun. And even when I had the kids, you know, that was part of my job.
And we'll see how Zim's coaching legacy lives on through his granddaughter, Whitney. Welcome to Raise All Access. I'm Tricia Whitaker. This was Don Zimmer's happy place. For 66 years, the man known simply as Zim couldn't get enough of the game and the relationships that he formed along the way. It's impossible to calculate how many people he met throughout the course of his career, but it's easy to figure out by talking to anyone who knew him that he certainly always left an impression.
Smile, cherub face, although he'll tell you, I didn't always look like this. That was his best line. You'd look at Zim and, you know, little chubby, little portly, little puffy cheeks. He would always tell you, I didn't always look like this. He wanted you to know that.
He was passionate about his family. He was passionate about, having a good time with his friends, the relationships that he made in this game of baseball that have been so incredible over the years. So, but yeah, passion is a good word to describe him.
First thing is it brings a smile to my face and everyone else's face. He was the manager of the Cubs when I was a kid, and I grew up a Cubs fan, so he was already a legend in my mind, and it was such an honor to be able to work alongside him, to get to know him when he was here with the Rays.
His loyalty to people in the game, his loyalty as a husband and father and everything else, that would be probably the main thing other people would say as well.
Baseball, I mean, just pure baseball. His character, he can be funny, he can be gruff, he's got strong opinions, and when you look at him, you think, oh, this tough guy, no, he's got the biggest heart, but it was just a game. He just loved the game, just loved the game of baseball.
I think of his cherubic cheeks. That's the first thing. And then you go to the eyes and it gets a little more complicated, you know? There are sympathetic eyes, there are fun eyes, and then there are the really stern eyes. And I've seen all of that through the years from Zim.
Nobody had a vibe as positive and great a vibe as Don Zimmer. Not that he was Mr. Sunshine and Lollipops all the time, and he was critical, but in a very constructive way and in a fun way, but people enjoyed being around him. And he just had this incredible positive vibe that you just sort of gravitated to.
When I hear the name Don Zimmer, I think baseball. And when you get to know him, you realize that that was his life. I mean, he loved baseball through and through. There was no part of the game that he didn't understand, that he didn't continually break down and learn from. But the short answer is Don Zimmer, baseball.
But if you really want to know who Don Zimmer was, the definitive source, without question, has to be his wife, Soot.
We went to high school together. We started dating when we were 16. And it was from then on for 63 years. But the best part about it, we had high school sororities at the time and fraternities, and I asked him on the first date. Now, I don't even know him, but another kid that was a friend said, oh, just ask Don Zimmer. And the football team was off that night because they were supposed to scout a game, and so he shouldn't have gone. And the fellow went to Don and said, would you go out with Soot, as I'm called? And he said no. So then the fella came back. He said, "It's all set up. Just go over and ask him." And when I went over and asked him, and he said yes, everybody laughed. Well, I didn't know what they were laughing about because he really. Well, that was the beginning.
Because he originally said no, but then you charmed him into saying yes.
He wasn't supposed to go out that night. He was supposed to scout a football game.
So when you agreed to get married on the field in Elmira, how much did you know about how your life would change and how big of a part baseball would play in your life?
Well, I didn't really know. I mean, he was in baseball his whole, for several years before we were married, so I knew it was going to be a different life than most. The best part about it, I was in nurses training, and it was a 3-year program. And he called me when I had 10 months to go, and he said, "I want to get married." And that was the end of the nursing program. But with all his ills and things that meetings and what, the nursing came in handy many times.
So tell me about the day you guys got married.
Oh, well, it was on the field, and it was witnessed by a lot of people. Not people can say they were married among 6,000, I think. But it was a great day. They did a nice thing. The Elmira Pioneers, part of the Dodger organization.
I was gonna say, did you ever imagine you'd get married on a baseball field?
No.
What were those early years like, playing in the minors and then making it to the big leagues?
I loved it. I drove all over. I mean, our first after Elmira was Mobile, Alabama. I mean, I drove everywhere. I don't think they do that today. I mean, I drove across the country many times, but it was all, to me, it was fun. And even when I had the kids, that was part of my job.
But what about those early years just making it to the big leagues with Brooklyn? You won a World Series with the Dodgers in '55, the second year in the bigs. That was a stacked roster.
There's a picture in our foyer of Don playing golf with Jackie Robinson. When Jackie Robinson retired, he went to work for Chuck Full of Nuts, and he had to come down to Tampa for business. And he called Don. He said, "Get us a golf game." Don was so thrilled that Jackie would take the time to call him. But those were thrilling years because those were all stars, above Don. Pee Wee Reese, Duke Snyder, it was a fun time. I loved it all. I never regretted any of it.
There were a lot of stops along the way. Did you have a favorite city or franchise during Don's playing days?
Somebody else asked me that question one time. I said, whatever place we were playing and they were paying us, that was my favorite city.
You lived in the moment.
I can't really say I liked them all. And I got to see the United States by doing it.
My mom was tremendous, taking us everywhere and making sure you saw the sights on the way out to LA, Grand Canyon, all those types of things. But, it was a fun life. You traveled a lot, and we made it to where we stayed here in the wintertime and went to school here, and then wouldn't leave until school got out for the summer. But the summer was always going to be where he was at.
Was Don someone that when he came home from the field, he could turn it off? Or did whatever happened on the field linger with him a little bit?
Well, there might have been times when he was a manager that he had times that he didn't exactly turn it off. But, he rode with the tide. I would say that he was pretty good with it.
And then he went right into coaching, after his playing days. He coached and managed in as many places as he did as a player, as he played in. I guess, how did you manage things on your end through all of those years and during that transition from a player to a coach and a manager?
I just rolled with the tide too. I mean, it was thrilling for me to be the wife of the manager, especially in the big leagues, Minor leagues, not as much, but I would say I just rolled along with the tide. I mean, I never had any trouble adjusting. And I always had other wife friends, I don't know how it is today. I think a lot of the players aren't married yet, but they sure make a lot more money.
Was he a different guy when he was managing and coaching as opposed to when he was playing? How did you see him change?
Oh, well, I think he matured more, I mean, it's a different ballgame when you're a manager than when you're playing. Because now when you're playing, you're trying to, make be the star or something, but when you're managing, you got to take care of everybody. Yeah, he was good at that.
In his managing days, the Cubs in '89, winning the NL East, he said, that was one of his proudest moments in baseball. Why do you think that was?
Because I think in spring training, they thought they'd finish last. And I can remember Jim Fry was the general manager, and he said, if you play 500 ball, we'll strut down Michigan Avenue. Well, here they win, the Eastern Division. I mean, it was very thrilling. And then that was the year he got Manager of the Year, too.
He got to be in some seriously cool places at different times in his career. I think he would have said, as a player, obviously the Brooklyn year in '55 and then '59 winning, but the year he was Manager of the Year in Chicago was probably his most rewarding time ever. And he always considered managing there and everything probably his most fun place that he was at.
Chicago would be the last place Zimmer managed, but his career would continue for 3 more decades, including a stint as Joe Torre's bench coach as the Yankees reeled off 4 World Series wins in 5 years.
Now that was very exciting. I would say that, first of all, he didn't really know Joe that well. But when he went to spring training, and it was right here, after a couple of days he came home and he said, this is going to work. Joe was the type of man that he didn't resent anything that Don would tell him. Try this or do, any information that he gave him. He was a great man to work for. And they got along great, and those were great years. A lot of
mutual respect between them.
A lot of World Series, yeah.
Still to come, how an invitation to lunch turned into a job offer that brought Don Zimmer home for good. It started when they were in high school and has now turned into what has to be the most comprehensive record of Don Zimmer's life and career anywhere. Soot Zimmer's scrapbooks are far more than just a compilation of newspaper clippings. They're an expression of one woman's devotion.
I started when we went together because he was quite an athlete in high school. And that was the first one. And then from then on, I did one every year that he played. And when he was a manager, sometimes it took 2 scrapbooks. So I have over 70. And this is the last one.
This is a big one.
This is all since he passed away. That's the part that amazes me, that he still has had that many written about him.
My mom might be the greatest baseball mom and greatest baseball wife of all time. Bar none, there's not many people that could have done what she did, drive across the country with us in the car as young kids, by herself, all the way to LA from here. Nothing to it. She did it all the time. She did everything at the house. He didn't even have to turn the thermostat on, the air conditioner. It was unbelievable.
He was so dependent on her. He'd say, Mom, do this, do that. And Soot, if you're around Soot, one of the first things you think about Soot is her laugh. She had the most contagious laugh, and she just was the perfect wife for him. She took care of him, she enjoyed him, she loved him dearly, and they were the couple you want to be.
There are a lot of advantages to being the wife of a player, but there are also challenges. And Soot was perfect. He could not have had a better girl to marry. They got married at home plate, and then he played a game. Let's go. So that's dedication. That set the whole tone for their relationship.
He couldn't do anything without Soot. I don't think he could pack a suitcase, to be honest with you. But Soot took such good care of him, and he was. He loved Soot so much, it was unbelievable. And no, she was everything to Zim. There's no question about that. And that's just the way it always was from the first time I met him, when he talked about it, till the last time I talked to him.
God loved Grams. She went through everything with him. So the two of them were a great couple, married for over 60 years. And it was just really special to be a part of that, especially during a lot of my most cherished years as a teenager and into college.
I ran the whole house. I paid the bills. that was my job. He had a job to run the ball club. I had a job to run the family as far as, pay the bills and the mortgage and all that kind of stuff. But that was my job. I never resented any of it. No.
You loved it.
I loved it, is right.
Then you come to the Rays, and at that point in his career, how happy were you to come to Tampa Bay?
Oh, I was thrilled to be living at home and I am so indebted to Stu Sternberg to put him to work for all those years. It was great. Many a time, I think, all those years he'd go to the ballpark and put that uniform on. And even when he was with the Rays, even though he wasn't in uniform during the game, he would go down and put the uniform on and hit fungos and everything before the game. Then he'd go back, get dressed, and go up and sit in the stands like the scouts. I'm telling you, and when I think he did that for so many years, I think that was great.
This was the biggest portion of his life that extended his life, was coming here. Started with Vince Namoli. They brought him in, and then the new ownership came. They were tremendous to him.
As soon as Vince found out that, they had the little breakup with the Yankees, Vince was on the phone immediately. I was working for Vince at the time, and he couldn't wait to get Don in here and talk to him. And Don was all over it. Don liked the area, he wanted to stay in the area, and he wanted to be baseball. Vince didn't have a very hard time talking him into this because it allowed him to do what he loved, where he loved doing it. So we were fortunate. It was one of the best moves Vince ever made.
Because by then he was a renal patient, doing dialysis and stuff like that. He just was able to thrive being here. It kept him around the game, around the young players. They adored him. He adored them. So it really, really extended his life, probably a half a dozen years, my guess.
He would come see me every day, the next day after the game, bring me hot dogs, like Coney Island hot dogs from down there in St. Pete. He'd plop them on a desk, sit down with me, and we would discuss the previous day's game.
He loved being a part of this organization. He loved the area, having lived here for so long. And really, Joe Madden welcomed him into the clubhouse and as a coach, and he put his mark on the club. He wasn't just here as an old man of baseball. He was active with the clubhouse, with the players.
He had credibility to begin with, but he also had the human side of him. And if you put those two things together, you can be a teacher in almost anything you do. And that's what Zim did here.
I was a bit of a hothead, like early on in my career. I thought the world was ending every time I got out. Every time I made an error, I was like throwing things. And so I think that was one of the things that Zim, he pulled me aside. I think it was after a game the next day. He kind of pulled me aside and was like, that's just a waste of energy. It doesn't do anything, and it's just like, it just shows your teammates that, you're out of control, kind of. And so that always stuck with me. Like, even if I'm having the worst game of my career, I punch out in a big moment, like, I've always tried to stay under control after that.
I asked one time, we're sitting, I don't know if it was in the clubhouse, I was fortunate enough to be his locker mate, and I go, Zim, when are you gonna retire? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I go, simple question, Zim, when are you gonna retire? Retire? What am I gonna retire for? And, but I don't think he ever was. If he was with us here today, he'd still be in uniform, without a doubt.
Don Zimmer's passion for baseball was infectious, and you only have to look at his family to see it. His son Tom was a player, a coach, and a big league scout for 50 years. And now his granddaughter, Whitney Goldstein, is carrying on that legacy as the head softball coach at the University of Rhode Island.
It's created this special thing because we could bond. So when he was still alive, I would talk about, he'd watch me coach and he'd be like, well, why did you do this? And I'd be like, well, because this, and this. And he'd be like, wow, that's smart. But just little things, we named our daughter, her middle name is Zim. Even my players, they'll ask me like, what do you love about him? Or, what was he like? Are you like him? And there's many traits at times that I probably do because I'm very feisty and I'm very passionate. But I do think, at the end of the day, when you love the game so much, that's why you're good and you appreciate the job that you have because you believe you have the best job in the world.
She's a great coach, and Don, he followed her in when she played at UMass. He would be so proud of her as being a coach. I'm going to start crying here in a minute. Oh, she's got something maybe from him, but she's quite a coach.
It's ironic that a man who never wanted the spotlight on him would still be getting honored for his contributions to baseball almost 9 years after his passing. And if Don Zimmer were around for his induction into the Rays Hall of Fame, you can bet he would accept the honor reluctantly.
Would want no part of it. Oh, why did I don't want to walk out? He wouldn't. I mean, deep down inside, he probably would have to feel, obviously great about it, and it would be special. But if you went to him and said, Don, we want to honor you. We're going to put you. You're going to be the inaugural member, and in the inaugural class, the first member going into the Rays Hall of Fame, he would want no part of it. That was just him.
There's no doubt about it. The fans loved him. The players respected him. His knowledge and lifetime in the game is I think why he's receiving this honor.
Zim has probably had, every honor bestowed on him that the game, could give him. Obviously, he's won World Series. He's played with Jackie Robinson. Like, he spanned the eras.
I would say to this point, it's been the greatest part of owning this team and being able to be, the guy here in charge of things is the time I was able to spend around Don Zimmer over the years.
The game needs more Zims. The game needs more people like that. You don't want to forget where you came from. You never want to run away from wisdom and experience and feel, and Zim was dripping with all of that.
He'd say, not bad for a 235 hitter. That was his favorite expression. I've heard it 1,000 times. I used to get tired of hearing it. He'd be humble, he'd be sheepish about it, but he'd be real proud.
I'm very indebted to the Rays for how nice they treated him. And now here we are going into the Hall of Fame in the first one. That to me is something.
What do you think he would say?
Well, he'd be thrilled. He'd be thrilled. And he'd say, me?